It is now time to begin. I'll let you go down from the stage. We're going to begin our first discussions on the planning and delivery of events. We're going to begin with a winner who pulled off the most incredible challenge, organizing the opening ceremony of the Games outside a stadium, changing the whole approach. That's Paname24, a group of 5 agencies which are competitors, but who worked together for this absolutely standout event with Philippe Castagnet, Julien and Thomas de Loubrière. Hello, gentlemen. If you'd like to take your places. If you'd like to sit down, thank you for being with us. You represent Paname24. This morning, Philippe Castagnet, your Director of Operations at Auditoire, Julien Carrette, CEO at Havas, and Thomas de Loubrière, founder of Double 2. After working together as Paname24, Philippe Castagnet, first of all, let's begin with the genesis, the whole development of this project. How did this totally mad idea come up of these competing agencies working together for this kind of event? Hello, everybody. So how did this come about? It came at a very early stage because, in fact, when the Games were awarded to Paris in 2017, the question came up for our respective agencies. We knew there would be these ceremonies. We knew what key events these are. This was an absolute key event, a chance of a lifetime. And so we started quite early on looking into the different formats that might be possible to take up this challenge of the ceremonies. And very early on, the idea came up of creating this French national team in the events sector. And this isn't obviously something that happened overnight, but we wanted to do this. We were talking about this with Thomas just before we came up on the stage. The first thing we wanted to do was to work with agencies who may be competitors day to day, but with whom we share common values, of a certain vision of our profession. And that was the first criterion. But this did happen very early on. Thomas, it's quite logical. Was it quite logical, do you think, to do this? In any case, the first thing we can say first thing we said when we understood that Paris would have the Games was that you have a certain feeling of modesty. We thought to us, is there a single player in France capable of taking up this challenge on their own? Obviously, at that time, we didn't know what the ingredients would be, how it would be staged, what the artistic principles would be, with Tony Estanguet and the organizing committee for Paris 24, but we could imagine that this really would be a huge task. So the first thing is that you feel rather modest, and then you say to yourself that one way or another, the Games are taking place in my city. That's my job. It is a possibility for expressing the things I do in my profession. I want to contribute one way or another, and I think we all felt the same thing. So once you realize this, you seek to put the different parts together in order to be able to contribute one way or another. To contribute. It really is, that's the idea, to contribute. And on that basis, faced with the unknown, and faced with the difficulty of the event, we decided, why not do this with friends, with people we trust, people who have the same values, the same culture as us, and that's how the association came into being. So you're looking for agencies that were complementary, that were different to each other, so that everybody could do their respective part, or not? No, we're competitors every day. Some perhaps have a slightly more of a focus on one thing or another, but we weren't looking to be complementary. What we were looking for, first of all, was really to join forces around our culture and values. When In the call for tender, initially, they were looking for an executive producer, but without revealing what the ingredients would be, the staging, what the artistic approach would be, very little indication, just the ambition. We knew that it would be around the Seine River for the opening ceremony of the Olympic Games and for the Paralympic Games coming afterwards. So apart from that, we knew nothing. So we weren't necessarily looking to be complimentary. Julien is very good on the logistics side, but that wasn't why we worked with him. No, that wasn't why we chose you, don't worry. But we were looking, first and foremost, to have a combination of companies based on whether we were capable really of working together, of getting on well together over this long process with all the obstacles there would be along the way. This sounds a bit idyllic when we hear you speaking about this adventure with a bunch of friends. But in practical terms, how did you allocate the different roles? And what role did you play? How did you work alone? How did you work with the organizers? We worked very closely with our client, because as you said, the client, Palmarès and Thierry Reboul, who was the designer of the initial idea of leaving the stadium and organizing this on the river. So they came up with the idea, they made the artistic and staging choices, and we are co-producers. So working hand in hand with the client, because each artistic choice has an impact on the logistics, on the production, and each production constraint has an impact on the artistic side. So really it's a constant to and fro between the two sides. Obviously with difficulties along the way. It's a marathon, this sort of process. But I think that really we must pay tribute to Palmarès24, because they were very demanding and they never gave up. An idea like this one in the world of communication, we always start out with big ideas which slowly get toned down and we end up with a compromise. Here, if anything, we started at 100% and ended up at 110%. They even tried to go further, to add in new groundbreaking ideas which we had to bring to life in the real world. So they were very demanding, very courageous, with Tony Estanguet, with the politicians, Thierry and his teams, and with our agencies, in order really to live up to that ambition, that slightly mad French ambition in France. We like to be a bit pretentious, to have high ambitions, but in a good way, to give meaning to these ceremonies. And ultimately, when did you stop thinking as individual companies and work together? Or from really very quickly, from the beginning, from the 17th of August 2022, the phone rang, and we were told, and we received lots of emails. So, but it's important, I think, that from that first day when we entered the premises, we forgot about our initial companies and we placed ourselves at the service of the project. It's a project which is greater than us. So we forget where we come from to really place ourselves at the service of this exceptional project. I think one thing that seems very important to me in our initial approach is that we didn't just form an alliance. We often have co-productions with alliances between us, with different forms of joint venture or partnership. Paname24 really is a legal entity. And we made this choice. We created Paname24 to answer the call for tender without knowing whether we would be chosen. And this was to be perfectly transparent. If you have a legal entity, given the number of audits you need to have and the monitoring to which you are subjected, which is quite normal, we thought to be fully transparent, we would actually create a proper legal entity. It has advantages in administrative terms and for transparency, but also to create an identity. In addition to the project itself, which was so exceptional, we needed to bring together lots of different skills with 250 people on a permanent basis, not just temporary workers. Towards the end, we had 250 employees, stable employees at Paname24, and we sought to create a Paname24 identity, and I think that's part of the key to success.
But if you went into the facilities of Paname24 throughout the time, because it started with 10 people and then it was 250 with really a ramp up towards the end, you know, Paname24, if you didn't know who the players were around the table, if you were there, there was a weekly board, you were unable to say who was who. It was just Paname24. It was embodied by this very group. So there was, you each had about 4 or 5 people who launched themselves in the project. But Thomas, you had to hire people to go up to 250. Was it freelancer? You had to, so permanent staff 250, but in the field it's 5,700. So you really had to hire these people. So yes, HR was a very important part of it all. So yes, there are people, permanent people who are part of Paname24 decided to be part of the project. So the idea was not to take the people from our agency that are permanent staff and make them work at Paname24 only, because it was just going to be a temporary. So what we did at the beginning is take what I would call the energies, the people who were the most convinced and most motivated to work on the project. But personally speaking, I spend more time with Cyril de Froissart, who is the partner of Auditoire, to build all of this rather than my own partner. So in terms hierarchy, everything was upended because I ended up with having to supervise or coordinating teams that were employed by Havas or Auditoire or the other way around. So everything was mixed. And because, again, the project was the above all, was like the overarching project. For Philippe, the most important thing was planning. What is behind that word? Well, behind planning, there's the whole, there's the English concept of readiness, that is to say, how to make sure that you're ready on the day of the event, so on D-Day. So, but the problem is that if you look at the paper, it seems like it's not going to work, because if you look at the size, 6 kilometers of event, 14 stages, 4 hours, 12,000 performers, everything is public, which means that you have to work with the state, the city of Paris, the security forces, the historical sites. So there were 300,000 audience members, which means that there's a flow from a security point of view. And the format of the event, as Julien was saying, is completely disrupted, because normally opening ceremony is a show, a parade, it's a series of sequence, and then there's the torch lighting at the end. But here, everything was mixed together. Everything was happening at the same time. All of this was supported by an architecture, a skeleton that was made up of 100 boats that on a element that is alive is the river. So if you add to this that there was also a lot of mistrust for 2 years, because we heard, you know, it's never going to work a lot, or just slightly. So, but it was light, but it was constant. But, you know, there was a national newspaper, it was saying, whatever, everything went well. So I printed that and I hung it on the wall. So if you look at all of this, it seems like everything is there for it to be a failure. But if you have events such as this one that is really bigger than life, it always happens in the events that something doesn't work. It's normal for our profession. But here, the parameter is that it had to absolutely not have a failure. But everything was fine, even though the weather was not on our side. There was no general rehearsal, which was because of confidentiality. It was not impossible. And in the end, it's a complete success. So it seems that in the legacy, if we want to draw the lessons, what is the takeaway from all that we need to keep for the future, is that planning really is one of the key elements of that. So planning lasted 2 years, just 2 years. It ramped up. It was there were several pillars around which planning was articulated, but we listed everything that was going to be not work. It's a contingency plan, it's called. So there's a whole team that's devoted to that. We look at, for instance, a delegation is late, they don't board their boat, the boat cannot leave. There could be a breakdown of a boat not working. That would be an issue. And then there could be the weather. Of course, we had rain, but there was the wind, also heat, and then the show itself, and then any artistic, human, technical hiccup. So it's a whole chapter, and we describe it in detail. And in the end, we have a plan, and everyone was doing it. I just want to add something on that. Our job is events. It's one of the main things that we need to do is anticipate. So anticipate risk and risk anticipation. But we went really far in the risk anticipation, in the planning, in the contingency planning. We have 6 kilometers and we have reporting from everyone. We could almost cry. There is going to be a hiccup. There was one. It was written in the plan. So when the fleet was getting there on the Friday, the whole mass, there was no anxiety, no stress. You were like Thomas Joly. Well, the issue was the intensity. It's the intensity of the rain. We had case linked to rain intensity. We knew it was going to rain. We didn't wait until the day before to know it was going to rain, but it was the intensity and how long it was going to last. And then we had this rain from the beginning to the end. It stopped at midnight, a little after midnight, so that people could leave. They were completely drenched, but it stopped raining, so it made people leave. So once you've written all of this, it's fine. But yet, when you realize that it's going to be 5,700 people over 6 kilometers with 3 operational centers, a command center, is how to articulate all of this. So how does it work if it's fine? What we call normal going. So, but then people are always asking us the questions. We call it the chain of command. So how to make sure that information goes through the right people so that we can really get a hierarchy of information. There are 3 levels, actually. The field with all the technique and the technical, the leaders, and then second level with the 3 operational centers. If there's a problem at the first level, it goes to the second level, and then if the solution is found, it goes back to the first level. And then there's the third level, where if a solution isn't found, this is where you need to change plans. So you need to make a decision to interconnect people from infrastructure, people from the river parade, the people from the show. So there are those 3 levels. And there's also the broadcast aspect, which is also linked to the top level. It means that it took a while to design this chain of command and the whole network that goes with it. But once we had it, it was really strong, really robust, and we shared it with Paris24, with the all the authorities. There was the security forces, the law enforcement, but the fire brigade, the people, the first aid. So this is a whole huge ecosystem. So it goes way beyond the 5,700 people. Yes. So there's a whole chain of command that is there, that exists, and we have to wonder, can we make it work? And so that's the third phase of the ignition, it's a simulation. That is to say, we close ourselves in rooms in very small groups, and we were writing scripts saying, this is it's 1830 wind, and then stronger winds, and then suddenly some tarpaulin is unstuck and ends up on the river and floats on the river. What do we do? So an hour later, we were still trying to think whether this tarpaulin actually exists, but we didn't have a solution. So we re-simulated very numerous ones. And so towards the end, I think there was 300 people. We were in different rooms because there were different command centers, and we managed to solve resolve the cases in real time. They were much more difficult because 1730 is okay, but if it's 1915 and there's someone who is with a shirt that says no war and is ready on the bridge and is ready to jump, what do? We really have to be ready for that. But it took us a while to get to the point where the command system would work. There was a whole skepticism from the production teams from the start. They were saying to the planning teams, we have other stuff to do than simulations. When we did the first one and we realized how complex it was, the fear changed camps because we were like, we have to do another exercise. We're not ready. Yes, exactly. So, Julien, was there a B plan for the ceremony? Can you tell us today? Yes, there was a B plan. As the president said, there wasn't a C, a D, or E plan, but there was a B plan. If you're the fifth economic power in the world and you welcome so many people and so many people watching on TV, of course, not having a B plan would be crazy. But as you know, B plan was if there was, for instance, a very serious terrorism attack, if the river continued to have this crazy flow, if over 600 or 700 we would have trouble, navigating the river. So the idea was not on the Seine, but to do it directly at the Trocadero, which of course would have been heartbreaking. So we had to manage teams, which in parallel to A teams were manufacturing B plan. If you just do slides and do this or this happen, but you're not able to deliver it if it happens on June 1st, June 15th, or July 1st. So they were actually working on the B plan. So it was difficult for A plan teams because they say, well, do you actually believe in B plan? We said, but we don't believe it. We really hope it's not going to happen, but we have to have the same level of requirement for B plan just in case it happens. So of course it was interesting to do, but there were a lot of things that we imagined for B plan that we actually used for A. So, the logistic, the Olympic Village, the arrival on the boats, a lot of stuff that we had put on the B plan that we used for the A plan, and then teams that were working on the B were actually ended up working on the A. So it's sort of like a mega size contingency plan that really helped us. What was the most important challenge for you? One of the challenges, once we had the streams, as you said, infrastructure, the security, the logistics, production, etc. One of this was set. It was the across the board, the cross-cutting, because if you do the little silos and each stream works really well, you end up with anxiety because you're wondering how to make sure information circulates, how to make sure that all the streams work together. So I think it's also a lesson in terms of management, for a takeaway for our company to be really good at parts, but also with the whole, and to be able to go between the big and the small, back and forth all the times. There was also something very specific that the organization committee was very keen on, with confidentiality. Of course, we had to respect that because they were completely obsessed with that confidentiality management. So in our teams, there were people that knew some parts. Some of them knew everything. It's just like the command center. So there were different levels, different tiers of confidentiality shared with different teams. So of course, it generated a lot. It created a lot of frustration. Some people could not enter certain rooms. It seemed completely absurd. But the B plan, for instance, it was the war room. No one had access to it. It was completely locked in the morning and in the evening, and the whole the directions, who was going to take part, the stakeholders. All of this was extremely complex to manage, and then there was frustration from the people who were doing it, and then in the information circulation, because some people were completely in the dark up until the last moment. That is to say, that is to make things that had never been done before, not knowing what was going to happen. So that was the more or less complicated part, but in the end it worked. So a month later, you had to deliver another ceremony. So you're laughing today, but it's actually what happened. So a second ceremony. So were the two projects completely dependent from or interdependent? How did you work between the two? to jump back on what I was saying, Paname24 is the delivery of the ceremonies in the plural and not just the opening of the Olympic and then the Paralympic. So they were separate teams. The core team, the large core teams, worked in parallel. So there were a lot of support functions that was working for both teams. CERT 3 is CERT 3. So we call it the opening ceremony of the Paralympics. So CERT 3, as we called it, in itself was something huge. But CERT 3, in the global context where you have to get the opening ceremony on the Seine, it seemed to be easy compared to that. But it wasn't easy at all in the end. So July 26th on the Seine, on the river, everyone saw it, was absolutely amazing. Of course, there was a whole dynamic that it created, that it triggered. So the CERT 3 teams, of course, wanted to get the same results, to provide the same quality, deliver the same quality of show. And it's actually what happened. But it worked so much, CERT 1 really helped because you saw what you saw, and there was such a momentum, and then the weather was much better. Yeah, the weather was great, but we could have had heat. So that was one of our contingency plan. After rain, we could have super heat. So we could be talking about the ceremonies and what happened behind the scenes for hours on end, but we will have to conclude. But I want to say, I would like to know what the takeaways are, because we're talking about legacy from a global perspective. What did the ceremonies show? How can we use all of this, that expertise, that cooperation, that for future events? What my takeaway is, and you said it in your introduction pretty much, it's the extraordinary enhancement of the French event sector. My friends are going to laugh because I already said that last time. I'm going to say it. There was a former president of the Republic was doing, it was François Hollande, on the France brand. If you compare it to the German, the Japanese, and the US brand, there are three keys image. So know-how, we know how to do nuclear plants and planes. Creativity, we had big important writers, script writers for cinema, and then the sort of like taking the different side, non-alignment of General de Gaulle. We always do things that way in France. In my opinion, the ceremony are really a vehicle for the image of France. We had so many know-how, people who were doing the everything. We are world leaders, creativity, there was hard rock, the Minions, the cinema, games, circus, and all kinds of artistic expressions. And then you have sort of like taking a different sidestepping, doing differently. We go outside of the stadium and we do it in the city. So the athletes were actually entering the city and up until the Vasque. It was not the fire, it was the idea of fire. You really have to be French to say, we are going to tell the story of fire rather than having a physical fire. So in my opinion, these ceremonies are the best advertising campaign for know-how and creativity in France, the French one, with the French and the entire world. And it was actually rather seen, that ad, the 1.5 billion, there's no official figure. We say 1.5 billion, that's the figure that's going around. So that's the one we'll keep in mind. Philippe, just a few words to conclude and to say what you are going to take away. Personally speaking, your agencies, well, personally speaking, I think I can speak on behalf of my partners. From a human perspective, it's incredible. I could speak about it for hours. So with Julien, just like Julien, it's the confidence that it generates in our ecosystem, in our industry, because we, in the end, have the ability to imagine and implement solutions on events that are completely out of proportion or completely different. We implemented with a fully French ecosystem, and the quality was so incredible. Paname24, we called it the Bureau of Legends, because you were there. You arrived in the meeting. You had, in the two meetings, it was Zinedine Zidane at every step of the way. At every meeting, I was meeting with someone like that. It was incredible to have such a wealth, such a quality in the expertise we brought together. So, of course, I have great confidence for the future. And what about you, Thomas? Just really quickly. On bringing all of these skills together, which was the main issue, which was what we cared about, what we wanted to do. You were talking about community and also the political support. It wasn't at the beginning. It was not completely true. There were barriers that we had to overcome, and of course, with the full, complete support of the organization committee, without whom nothing would have been possible. At one point, did you start doubting, be afraid? Of course, yes, many. It's over. I never want to do this ever again. I think for everyone it happened. 250 of us, at least one time, were like, I'm done. So, but over the last months, when there was political support, complete, full political support, without the state services, we would never have been able to do that. So when the state, the nation, the government, we depended on them for security, not just for that, but for all the security. Once this whole apparatus starts working, such as the army, for instance, we can't tell you the stories, but for instance, the army services, oh, come on, tell us a story. Something unbelievable, something absolutely unbelievable. So once the whole state apparatus works with us, that's how it turns out. But when they don't, without the security forces and the whole government apparatus, it would never have been brought to life. So this is a French experience also. So this is the idea that we are going to remember now that our clothes are dried since July 26th. This is what we'll remember. Thank you so much for what you said. We could have talked for hours, but you're going to stay with us throughout the day, so you can go and ask them questions during lunch. In particular, thank you so much to all three of you, and congratulations again for this French success, the success of Paname24, the agencies. So